Good day. This is Michael Bender from the Center for Fiscal Equity, and this is our attachment on trade policy. Consumption taxes could have a big impact on workers, industry, and consumers. Enacting an invoice VAT, or goods and services tax, is far superior to a tariff. The more government costs are loaded onto an invoice VAT, the better. If the employer portion of old age and survivors insurance, as well as all of disability and hospital insurance, are decoupled from income and credited equally, and personal requirements are not used, there is no reason not to load them onto an invoice VAT. This tax is zero rated at export and fully burdens imports. So, yes, all of those things that are now payroll taxes, except for the employee contribution, would be put onto a VAT. 6.5%, maybe a bit more. It would make sure that exporters aren't paying that, because seen another way, it is not much as it. To not put as much taxation onto a VAT as possible is to enact or maintain an unconstitutional export tax. Adopting a goods and services tax, or invoice VAT, is superior to its weak sister, the destination-based cash flow tax. That was contemplated for inclusion in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Not a typo. Because we lost jobs, it would have run afoul of WTO rules on taxing corporate income. The I-VAT, which taxes both labor and profit, does not. So you can't. The second tax applicable to trade is a subtraction, which I call an SVAT, or it's also called a net business receipts tax. This tax is designed to benefit families of workers through direct subsidies, such as an enlarged and refundable child tax credit, or indirect subsidies used by employers to provide insurance or tuition reimbursement, even including direct medical costs and elementary school tuition, the last being on a state level SVAT. As such, a subtraction VAT cannot be border adjustable. Doing so would take away needed family benefits, because whether you're an exporter or an importer, you need your peeps need their child tax credit, and they need their health care, because these things benefit the employee. It should be loaded into the cost. Compensation. And we could run all income support through the public sector, at least for health and children and education. And this fact would have a huge impact on trade policy, probably much more than trade treaties. If one of the deductions from the tax is the purchase of employer voting stock, in equal dollar amounts for each worker, not percentages, or over fairly period of time, much of American history, if not employee-owned outright, and there are other policies to accelerate this, like ESOP conversion, it will give workers enough of a share to greatly impact wages, management hiring, and compensation, and dealing with overseas subsidies and the supply chain, as well as certain legal provisions that limit the fiduciary impact of management decision to improve short-term profitability. At least this is the excuse managers give for not privileging job retention. In other words, it's better for workers, as are other ways to increase ownership. Employer owners will find it is in their own interest to give their overseas subsidiaries and their supply chains employees the same deal they get as far as employee ownership, plus an equivalent standard of living. The same pay is not necessary. Currently, markets will adjust once worker standards of living rise. Over time, ownership will change the economics of the nations we trade with, as working in employee-owned companies will become the market preference and force other firms to adopt similar policies. In much the same way that even without a tax benefit for purchasing stock, employee-owned companies that become more democratic or even more socialistic will force all other employers to adopt similar measures to compete for the best workers and professionals. In the long term, trade will no longer be an issue. Internal company dynamics will replace the need for trade agreements as capitalists lose the ability to put the interests of one nation's workers against the others. This approach is also the most effective way to deal with the advance of robotics. If the workers own the robots, wages are swapped for profits, with the profits going to where they will enhance company consumption without such devices as guaranteed income. We can either have guaranteed income, in other words, taxing companies' profits, or we can have guaranteed ownership, which is less socialistic. So if you don't like socialism, you should support employee ownership. That is it for this attachment. Thank you much for your time.